The exclusive story by the Standard Group, KTN, has sent people in Murema into celebration, song and dance. And this breaking news, this exclusive, has sent analysts rushing back to the drawing boards with their calculators to recalculate the election figures for the 2027 general elections. I'm sure most of us know exactly what I'm talking about. Apparently, Kalonzo Musyoka brokered a deal so that at the end of it, there was a handshake between retired President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, still very influential in Murema, and new kid on the block in Murema, Rigathi Gachagua. And where did this happen? Not in Kenya. It happened all the way in a country called Nigeria. And we are told in this exclusive story from KTN and the Standard Group that another very key figure in making this deal happen is former Nigerian president, a great buddy of the late Raila Amolo Odinga, Olusegun Obasanjo. Now, I've realized from the reaction from many quarters that a vast majority of Kenyans still don't think this is a big deal. Actually, it is. Actually, very big. But today I want to back up a little. Yeah, because my first attempt to explain this didn't quite work out well. So let me take a different route and let me back up a little into this much hyped opposition unity. This thing that is causing so many Kenyan sleepless nights. That the way things are going, it is unlikely that the opposition will have a unified candidate to face Ruto in 2027. People are losing sleep over this. Well, you know my stand on that one. There is no need to lose sleep. It is irrelevant whether the opposition unite and present one candidate or not. It is still one term, for sure. And very interesting, the reason why that is so also applies to Murema, and especially those who believe that Murema unity is not that important. Okay? And actually, surprise, surprise, I too believe, and I'm going to explain why, that Murema unity is a non-issue. It is not important. I know you're very shocked. Tuliza Boli, I will explain very carefully so that we're all very clear. But let us start with this national opposition fielding one candidate, one presidential candidate. Manenos. And the reason is Kenyan politics has changed a lot. In fact, Kenyan politics has changed so much that there are very many people in the next general elections who are going to be caught flat-footed. What just happened? Okay? That is how much it has changed. Are you aware that before, opposition fielding one candidate was so very terribly important because voters were waiting for instructions to follow on who to vote for? Well, breaking news, that has changed. Whether we like it or not, whether I like it or not, whether you like it or not, it has changed forever. Believe it or not, never again are Kenyan voters going to agree to be grouped together like goats in a holding pen somewhere. Never again will Kenyans agree to do that when it comes to how they vote. You know, I'm on the ground. I listen to the ground. And I was very shocked the other day when in a very remote area of Kenya, very remote, people were saying, hii maneno ya 6-piece imeisha. You know, 6-piece means that they vote for ODM, even without looking at the individual candidate. Somebody who has got limited education, very limited, was talking like this. What do you think that means? Anyway, bila kizungu mingi, what I am saying is that it does not matter if the opposition have a single candidate or not, because voters this time round are even going to ignore that single opposition candidate and are going to decide on a candidate on their own. Okay, I'm sure most of you don't believe me on that one. And so let me put it in another way. In case the opposition do not agree and several of them vie for the presidency, it will still not matter, because Kenyans are going to behave like the Agikuyu voters. They are going to decide on who the single candidate is, and all the votes will go to that candidate. To be clear, whether you like members of the House of Mumbi or not, they have been doing this for ages, for decades. And the reason why the rest of Kenya does not do the same is historical. It has nothing to do with what is between the ears. Okay? You see, members of the House of Mumbi, our forefathers, were forced to learn politics very early in a very brutal manner because the colonialists wanted their land. They grabbed the land of the Agikuyu. Mashamba ya Wakikuyu ndio walikuwa na mezea mate. That is a historical fact. And so the Agikuyu were forced against their will to start reading politics very early. What were the rest of us doing? Like the Akamba? We were basking in the sun, enjoying ourselves, and if it is true about the Akamba, looking at the chicks. Oops, that is a very old school expression. I meant looking at the ladies. In Mombasani, they were basking at the beach and dreaming of their next meal, maybe pilau or biryani. All this while our Kikuyu brethren were very busy doing serious calculations of political survival, serious calculations of how to get back the ancestral land. Okay, I'm sure you get it. And this is why, if you look at the voting patterns in the past, I'll give you two very compelling examples. Boardroom decisions at a single candidate, at a unity of the community, does not affect the way the Agikuyu vote. In 1992, everybody was very excited about the first multi-party elections since independence. And of course, some analysts, including my political lecturer, were very worried that Murema had two strong candidates in those elections. They should have united. But the voters on the ground made their own decision who the unity candidate was. Kenneth Stanley Njindo Matiba. And a vast majority of votes went to him. So much so that Kibaki was so embarrassed. He was the senior politician here, and he lost to Matiba. Youngster Matiba, yeah, if you looked at the ages. And to prove that it was not a coincidence, it was not a fluke, in 1997, when every serious analyst was predicting that Matiba would get more votes than Kibaki yet again, Murema surprised everybody. I think this came from the realization that Matiba was not well. He could not even sign his own name. Okay? And so all the votes this time round went to General Coward, Emilio Stanley Moi Kibaki. Now, if we remove the rigging component, Matiba won the 1992 presidential elections, and Kibaki won the 1997 presidential elections. And for those who want to argue that had Kibaki put his votes together with Matiba's in 1992, their single choice for president would have won, allow me to disagree. Moi would just have found another way to rig himself back in. Okay? My point is, there is irrefutable proof that boardroom deals do not affect Murema voters. No way. Well, that disease, a very good disease, believe it or not, has now been transmitted to the rest of Kenyan voters from other communities. Believe it or not. Trust me, Time will tell. Now, I'm sure most of us are confused because you're wondering, what is wrong with Kumekucha Chris today? Because I said very early on that this handshake between Gachagua and Uhuru is very significant. And now I'm saying Mrema voters always ignore boardroom deals, including handshakes. Kwani Kumekucha is confused? Actually, I'm not. Let me explain. There is another very powerful reason why this handshake between Uhuru Kenyatta and Rigathi Gachagua is President William Samoei Ruto's worst nightmare by far. And it is the following. Actually, just one name. Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. He has too much information. And now, he can be able to action this information. He can be able to use and share this knowledge with Rigathi Gachagua and the rest of the opposition. That is a major game changer. Now, despite the fact that the single candidate who both Uhuru and Gachagua agree on, this time round, there is a high likelihood that the Mrema voters, when they sit down to consider, will agree with them. Okay? And what that means is that the votes in the basket of Uhuru and Gachagua are enough to win the presidential election. How so? Block votes from the Mrema all in one basket, about 6 million. And then Uhuru Kenyatta influence and inside information will also bring in some other votes. I would estimate them at over 4 million. What inside information? I can hear somebody asking. Well, bila kizungu mingi, which buttons to touch, which buttons to push to get certain communities into that basket? As I've said before, a former president is a very dangerous person. Why? Because of the information they have. Let me summarize that in case I've lost somebody. Mrema voters normally ignore boardroom deals, normally ignore a single candidate chosen for the region, and they make up their minds on their own. And more often than not, it is another candidate other than the unified candidate. They make their own decisions. And that is why Mrema producing a single candidate, in my opinion, is not that important. And this is why the main reason why the Gachagua-Uhuru handshake is such a nightmare to Ruto is something else. And it is Uhuru's inside information, inside knowledge. Okay? I hope that's clear now. And now the other bombshell from this exclusive story from the Standard Group. And it is the fact that the meeting to unify Mrema will still take place mid-month, middle of this month, which is Valentine's Day. So that Valentine's Day, much hyped meeting of Valentine's Day, that Uhuru came out and denied, is actually going to take place. What? Because we are told this handshake will be formalized in Kenya on that day. Now, of course, using logic, after Uhuru shakes hands with Gachagua again, because they've already shaken hands in Nigeria early last month, early in the year, what kind of speeches do you think will be made? Speeches to unite the community. By the way, there is another reason, yet another reason, why this is a nightmare for Ruto. Nothing to do with the presidency. You see, this unity meeting will confirm the Mount Kenya party, the Mrema party, which means very many members of parliament, governors, etc., will be elected on the ticket of the Mrema party, which I believe will be the DCP, Gashagua's party. What about Uhuru Kenyatta's Jubilee? Well, the way the fourth president of Kenya has been playing his politics, it is very clear. His focus is on the presidency. I'm sure if you think about it a little deeper, you will totally agree with me. And in any case, since the handshake between Gachagua and Uhuru will mean a coalition between DCP and Jubilee, it really doesn't matter. Yeah, all the parliamentary seats will go to that coalition. All the parliamentary seats from Murema and also from Friends of Murema, Friends of Uhuru, yeah, will go to that single coalition, which will be a very powerful coalition. So much so that in the unlikely event, very unlikely event, that Ruto wins this election, he will still have a terrible headache in parliament. Because believe me, this time round, it will not be easy to just buy members of parliament like he has been doing. Friends, kumeduka. And finally, there is something very suspicious about this Kalonzo Musyoka brokered handshake that happened in Nigeria, not in Kenya. Since when have you heard of a handshake happening in a foreign country? Well, we can easily guess why. They needed the privacy, okay? Nobody wants goons interrupting their meeting. And of course, even if UD had this information, there was no way they were going to put goons on an aircraft to go and disrupt a meeting in Nigeria, a foreign country. But if you ask me, and maybe I need to whisper this idea of including Kalonzo Musyoka's name and a foreigner's name, Bwana Obasanjo, may be a red herring. In my opinion, I think Uhuru and Gachagua just sat down together and decided this thing. And then after the handshake, being the politicians they are, they decided to manufacture a story, this Nigeria story. So they went all the way to Nigeria, and you know the rest of the story. What? Kenyan politics is becoming too dramatic. Don't you agree? By the way, have you taken in my very latest special report? No? Well, the information in this special report is mind-boggling. I understand people don't want to hear anything about Ruto. But hold on a minute. Don't you think it is a good idea to know what your opponent is doing, what they are planning chini ya maji, their secret deals? Don't you think that is terribly important so that you know how to counter it? Huh? Because there are so many things which are happening. A vast majority of them you have never even imagined, let alone heard of. In fact, your reaction to most of them will be, wow, 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 wow. Ah, aye, hey. You can see the details on your screens right now. For only Kenya shillings 3,999, you can get this highly sensitive information, a lot of it very inside information, in my latest special report. All you have to do is to M-Pesa to the usual number, which you see on the screens right now, or 701 333 112. And don't forget to text me your email address, or even SMS me your email address, using the same M-Pesa number or the same email. In case you're in a position to, please move with speed. This offer is disappearing very, very soon. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.